Hello there. I have had such a lot of trouble with my outboard motor over the last couple of years that now that I've finally found the solution, I thought I'd share it in case anybody else is going through the same thing. The symptoms were that it would run reliably for hours and hours, and then as soon as you change the throttle setting it would either stall or falter. And generally that was the worst possible time, either coming up to the mooring in a strong tide or going past the chain ferry at Sandbanks. I was at my wit's end, ready to get rid of the engine completely, but I do believe I've now sorted it. Great thanks to Mark at Pool Marine Services, who was really the instigator of all these ideas. This is the carburettor, and I've cleaned this and blown it out with an airline many times, and it just never seemed to fix anything. The float chamber was one of the first thoughts, and again I checked that several times, couldn't find anything terribly wrong with it. Apart from occasionally a little bit of dirt in it. The float chamber can be taken off with these 4 screws. The float chamber is empty now. I've cleaned it out, but it has a drain screw at the side which can be used to get rid of any little bits of water or grit, which I'd used many times. And the float was the culprit. When the float moves up and down, it opens a valve that allows fuel into the float chamber, and mine was about that sort of angle. I had a feeling it was set too high, or too low if it's the right way up, but the only way to adjust it is with this tiny little brass tab here, and that was already quite severely bent, so I couldn't bend it anymore. The actual float valve is attached to the float chamber, attached to the float rather, by a little spring clip. If I take that off the spring clip, you will see the actual business end of the valve that closes against the seating is rubber. That's fine, there was nothing wrong with that. But at this end there's a rubber bung, and that was at least 2 millimeters out of the valve. Very difficult to push back in, but I've now seated that properly. The valve is attached onto the float with that little metal clip, and the whole thing then fits down into the valve seating. The pin holds it in place, and the screw holds the pin in place. Now when that is done up, the float should be sitting almost horizontal. Again, thanks to Mark from the workshop manual. The float height is 14 millimeters, plus or minus 2 millimeters. The float height can be measured with a vernier off this face, and it's now set. I've now set it at 14 millimeters. As you see, it's almost horizontal. Before it was at least at that sort of angle, which was restricting the amount of fuel and therefore strangling the engine. The other thing I'm going to do, just as belt and braces approach, is to change the diaphragms in the fuel pump. You can see this is made up of a face, steel valves in here, and a diaphragm, rubber diaphragm. There's a diaphragm on either side. I've already taken this off and cleaned the inner face, so now I will take the outer diaphragm and gasket off. The face is fairly clean already. There's just a little bit of gasket material on there. I'm not going to attack it with any wire wall or scalpel or anything like that. The new parts are again sorted out by Mark, who was fantastic. These are fairly soft rubber, and you can see that the old ones have become quite stretched and saggy, especially the inner one, which is quite soft now. So then the sequence is the inner gasket lining up with this small hole at the top, the inner diaphragm, the pump body, the outer diaphragm, which is a strange shape, so you can tell which way around it goes, and the outer gasket and cover plate. There is the reconditioned diaphragm fuel pump. This is free. I've already cleaned the jets, one in here and the main jet under this rubber plug in here. So I've already cleaned those, blown them through with an airline. And then the float chamber fits on top, and screw at each corner. There is the assembled carburettor with its reconditioned diaphragm fuel pump. I have a new fuel filter to go back on there, and then it's ready for going back on the water again. So I hope that this is finally the solution to my problems.